Hello there, my name is Jake Helmsley, and we here at ATV, we like to have some fun, but also, we like to find ways to capitalize on our flash in the pan, our limited time frame in which we're able to achieve fame. So, as we want to be able to financially set ourselves up for our future, many of us have started to take sponsors, and us here at this program, we've taken a sponsor as well. Our sponsor for this week is Jackets I Found. Now, throughout the show, you might be seeing me wear different jackets I found, and I hope that you enjoy them. And remember, this is SportsZone.
Hello and welcome to another edition of SportsZone. I am joined by Vikram, which means it's Studio 90 time. Club football takes a hiatus for a week and a half to go on international break, but there's still lots to talk about from this past week in club soccer, so we will jump right into it. The Champions League was played this past week, and as we previewed last week, not a lot of big matchups to look forward to, but there was a very shocking result to come out of it. Real Madrid drew 3-3 with Legia Warsaw, putting their position in their group with Borussia Dortmund a little bit in flux. So Vikram, what do you think are going to be the ramifications of this draw, as far as not as far as progressing in the group, but possibly on teams they could, play in the knockout stages?
Yeah, I was really surprised to see that because you don't expect that with Madrid. I mean, they scored 2 goals first, and I think they just took it lightly, and that could pay them a difficult round of 16 because if they go second, they face a very strong team. So let's see. Hopefully, they beat the 2 Sporting and Dortmund and go top, but they have the caliber to do that. But let's see. It's going to be tough for them.
They definitely, yeah, as you said, they definitely have the talent to do it, but they didn't make it any easier with that result. They were level with Dortmund going into that game. Obviously, Dortmund beat Sporting to create a 2-point gap between those teams. So that's probably one of the more intriguing groups to look for as we preview Match Day 5, which will happen later in November. But another big matchup, it was the return game of Man City Barcelona. Barcelona really dismantled Manchester City in the game at the Camp Nou, at the Bernabeu. No, the Camp Nou. But in the return leg, Manchester City performed very strongly and really maybe made a statement, Vikram, in terms of their intentions in Europe.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't expect that from City because they dominated the game very much. Barca were good, but City just took the edge, and they had more chances. They could have scored a couple more goals, actually. It was really good to see the game. It was like counter-attack from both teams, so it was a good game to watch, and City just took the edge, and surprisingly, the Barca lost, and they have some defensive issues now, Barca.
It'll be definitely interesting, and you would think that Manchester City would have been able to catapult from that performance to perform strongly in the league on the weekend against Middlesbrough, but that unfortunately was not the case. And in a weekend when a lot of teams dropped points, probably most surprisingly was Manchester City. So Vikram, what do you think contributed to that? Do you think they were still recovering from the Barcelona game, or was it just a factor of Middlesbrough playing extremely well in that game?
I think they just couldn't kill the game. They had many chances to kill the game. Aguero had many chances. It might be the reason of the overjoy beating Barca, but they should have won that game. It's Middlesbrough. I think Victor Valdez needs some credit because he had brilliant saves, about 6 to 7 saves, so he deserves some credit, but Man City needs to win those games. You can't drop points against teams like Middlesbrough.
Yeah, I agreed. Victor Valdez did perform admirably, but as you said, dropping points from a winning position, really not what you want to do when you're chasing the title, and especially when it's as tight as it is at the top of the Premier League. Another team, well, you can't really say maybe dropped points because it was 2 top-level teams playing each other, but Arsenal and Tottenham drew 1-1 early Sunday morning. Vikram, which of those teams do you think will benefit more from that or will take away more from that result?
I think Spurs will, because Arsenal could have won the game, maybe should have won the game because they are on a high, and Spurs have been drawing games, so this game was a pressurized game for them because they had to win, and they got a draw, but still that point was vital for them as they have many injuries. And I think Arsenal would be sad because it was at home and they should have won the game. Tottenham have had midfield issues, and Harry Kane just came back, and Janssen doesn't look like a good fit for Tottenham. They need another striker or some kind of. They need a goal scorer apart from Harry Kane in that team.
Definitely, as you said, it really Tottenham in that game were prime for a result in favor of Arsenal. Dele Alli was injured, didn't play in that game. That was Harry Kane's first full 90 minutes. Didn't make it the full 90 minutes, but first game league action in a couple months. But Tottenham able to grind out the result using a 3-4-3 formation, which across the pond or across the town in London, Antonio Conte has been using to great effect, including a 5-0 defeat of Everton to put them in second place in the league. So Vikram, what's going on with Chelsea? 4 weeks ago, we were talking about how Chelsea needed to sort themselves out defensively, and now they're all of a sudden in second place in the league.
Yeah, I think he's just transformed Chelsea completely. I mean, what a game that was. 5-0 against Everton, who have been defensively solid this year. But yeah, Hazard has transformed himself. 2 goals, and he looks like the old Hazard a couple of years ago. The whole team is gelling well. They have the energy on the field. This formation suits them a lot. They play with the wing backs really well. Costa is on fire. I think the whole team is combining well. I don't see any negatives, at least for the past 5 games. I don't know if they can keep it for the whole season. If they do, they are really title challengers this year.
Yeah, Antonio Conte, what he's been able to do in that short span of time to get those players to play his system and playing as well as they are is very remarkable. And they have certainly laid the marker and said, we're a team to be reckoned with in this Premier League fight. But the team, as we enter the international break, who sits atop the table is Liverpool, who, if we want to talk about performances, they defeated Watford 6-1, and they are free-flowing and free-scoring, and Jurgen Klopp has everything working for them. Philippe Coutinho is looking like a PFA Player of the Year candidate at this point in time, playing phenomenally well. Vikram, what do you think the key is to their offensive success, and is Liverpool for real?
I think it's Klopp's energy in these players, which you can see on the field. He used to do that with Dortmund, and you can see instances of that in Liverpool. I think that trio of Mane, Firmino, and Coutinho is just sublime. I was seeing a comparison about Neymar and Suarez, Messi. They've scored, I think, 18 goals this year, and the Liverpool striker have scored 16 goals. So that's like amazing. And I don't know if they're title contenders, to be honest, because they need to solve their defensive issues. They're not that bad, but I don't think they can hold up till the end of the season. He needs to buy someone, but attacking wise, they look the real force, and I think there's no better attacking team right now in the league apart from Liverpool.
And they're playing extremely well, and they've got a lot of their tests out of the way. They've beaten Arsenal and beaten Chelsea already. They've beaten Everton, who potentially could factor into that top 4. They've beaten they've not played Manchester United yet, but they've every test that they've had so far, they've really succeeded with, and it's shown that they can be a highly potent offense that's a force to be reckoned with in the Barclays Premier League. So those are the latest stories as we enter the international break. They will return 2 weeks from this past weekend to resume league play, but until then, that's all the time we have on Studio 90. Stick around for more Sports Zone after this.
Hello and welcome back to more Sports Zone. My name is Jake Elmsley, and this is our NFL segment, Going for 2. Now we're going to start this off by talking about, let's start with the freshest thing in my memory, which is the Sunday night game, my game of the week from last week, where we had the Oakland Raiders squaring off in the black hole against the Denver Broncos. In the absence of our good friend Nathan Lee, I myself will be fanning out about this Oakland Raiders team that I predicted to be an AFC Championship contender coming into this season. The Oakland Raiders have have at least made a move towards cementing themselves as being a top team in the AFC, being able to beat the previous top team in the AFC from last year, their division rival, the Denver Broncos, and being able to improve to a 7-2 record. Really, the game plan in this game for the Raiders was fairly simple. And what we saw in this game was basically just the Raiders being able to, well, A, have a far better running game than the fairly static Denver running game that they've had since C.J. Anderson went down. And we were able to see Latavius Murray rush for over 100 yards and 3 touchdowns, with their backup running backs also stepping in. Also, another thing that we saw in this game was just the depth at wide receiver that this Raiders teams have, with not only obviously Amari Cooper and Michael Crabtree chipping in, but Seth Roberts, as well as that entire cast of Raiders' 4th string, 5th string receivers producing, even when certain guys are going down with injuries throughout the game. Also, we saw Derek Carr put in not the 513-yard performance he had last week, but a fairly sizable performance, going over about 200 yards with a touchdown or 2. Now, what we saw on the opposite side for the Denver Broncos is basically them catching the disease that the penalty disease that the Raiders had last week, having over 6 penalties for the tune of over 100 yards. And this might be a concerning game for the Denver Broncos, whose offense, I believe, had 5 3-and-outs to start the game. The Raiders having 10 first downs before the Broncos even had 10 yards of total offense in this game. And mind you, they were able to come back and make the score semi-respectable 30-20, but by the time they were able to get to that 20 points, this game was over. So it'll be interesting to see if the Raiders are able to keep up this momentum they've had throughout the entire season up to this point. But other than that, a lot of other interesting games this week. Probably another big one was the Indianapolis Colts being able to beat the Green Bay Packers. With for much of the game, the Green Bay Packers have looked the way they've looked for the last 15-odd games, with the offense struggling. But then down the stretch, the Colts were really with that weak defense. Aaron Rodgers finally being able to come back and try to string something together, but just not being able to quite do enough to come back and beat this Colts team that's really been struggling, which is interesting because this Colts team for much of the year has basically been riding or dying on the back of Andrew Luck, with a lot more dying than riding. But the Colts, even with Andrew Luck throwing 2 interceptions to start the game, the Colts were still able to stay in this game and beat off an NFC title contender. I mean, one of the big teams in the NFC, but the Packers themselves have been struggling much throughout this year. Really, their last convincing win being against the Chicago Bears, and them being dominated by Dallas and not being starved off from yet another comeback against the Atlanta Falcons, which is Aaron Rodgers not being able to come back is something that his fans aren't really used to seeing outside of this funk they've been in for almost a year now. But outside of that, another interesting game from this week was the Steelers versus the Baltimore Ravens. I myself was fairly surprised when I saw that Big Ben was playing this week. Obviously, it came out being a very late thing to come out, but from what I could tell, I didn't think he'd be able. I didn't expect a player to be able to come back from a torn meniscus in barely 2 weeks. But really, I watched most of this game, and Ben Roethlisberger for a lot of this game, and really the entire Steelers offense was completely out of tune, with Roethlisberger missing what seemed like some easy throws for him at least. And then even when he was able to make these throws, a lot of his receivers not being able to make plays on them, with guys like Sammy Coates dropping passes that could have gone. So really the entire Steelers offense just out of sync for most of that game. Really, I believe they were shut out for almost 3/4 of that game. And meanwhile, you saw the Ravens defense, obviously the Ravens defense being on the other side of that, being able to create trouble for this offense and really do the best job a defense can possibly do for most of that game. And the Ravens, meanwhile, looked fairly good for a lot of that game. Their offense was fairly stagnant, not nearly as much as the Steelers, but you saw them really be able to be saved by a 95-yard touchdown reception by offseason acquisition Mike Wallace on a beauty of a run on a very short pass by Joe Flacco that otherwise was by the self-proclaimed fastest player in the NFL, taking it all the way. Now, another interesting subplot in a game that, otherwise was fairly uninteresting, predictable affair, was in the Dallas Cowboys versus the Cleveland Browns. Probably the interesting subplot in that game was how would Jamie Collins perform on the Browns defense after reports coming out in the last few days that Patriots coaches were sick of his attitude and that he was very unwilling to adjust to his scheme, and how the Patriots were planning, apparently before trading him, to turn him into a part-time player. But in this game, we really saw what was seen was Jamie Collins, well, obviously on a far worse defense than he had in New England, really Jamie Collins blowing a lot of his own individual assignments, with Jason Witten, of all players, with the old workhorse, playing right off of him, with Jason Witten having one of having his first 100-yard game in over 40 games, topping over 130 yards with 2 touchdowns. We saw very early in the game on one of the Cowboys' first drives, Jason Witten and burning don't usually go in the same sentence, but Jason Witten was able to burn Jamie Collins for around a 20-yard touchdown. It's interesting to see if maybe this will be another questionable Belichick move that actually turns out to have been the right decision. Anyway, though, moving on, another interesting game from this week. We saw another subpar performance from this Minnesota Vikings. The Minnesota Vikings losing on the first overtime possession to the Lions. On the first possession of the Lions, with the Lions winning on the first possession of overtime. With them scoring a touchdown, obviously in line with the NFL overtime rules. But we saw once again the Vikings offense struggle against what hasn't been a phenomenal but fairly serviceable Detroit defense, with just Sam Bradford being harassed for most of the game, the running game not able to do much, and then barely being able to win this game with coming back to score a touchdown with about 30 seconds to go. That would have been a game winner had Matt Stafford not expertly driven the Lions into field goal range, with Matt Prater being able to rekindle a little bit of his Broncos magic, hitting a 58-yard field goal to send the game into overtime. But another subplot from this game, I think was actually been revealed recently, was Blair Walsh continuing to struggle, with Blair Walsh missing an extra point. And of course, when you look at a game that went to overtime, that extra point would have obviously making that field goal completely useless. And this Monday, the Vikings are being reported to be looking at free agent kickers to bring in and maybe replace Blair Walsh. But obviously, this could also be a tactic by the Vikings to basically try to motivate Blair Walsh with some negative reinforcement, with obviously it being very difficult to find a serviceable kicker in November of the NFL season. But anyway, from all of us, and by all of us I mean me, here at Going for Two, that's all the time we have right now, and there will be more SportsZone coming at you next. Hello, and welcome back to more SportsZone. This is the Galleon and the Gridiron, our fantasy segment, where I will show you all your tips, tricks, secrets, and skills you need to win in your NFL fantasy league in Week 10 and beyond. I'm your host, Jake Elmsley, and let's dive right on in. All right, so starting off, I will start with some thoughts from this week. We saw once again the Green Bay Packers have a subpar offensive performance, which obviously is concerning to all you players who may own players on that team, with them unable to perform against a very weak Colts defense. Obviously, we have not really seen Devontae Adams carry over from his stellar performance against the Chicago Bears a few weeks ago. And while Randall Cobb managed to have a touchdown, after coming off the injured list right before the game, basically, we saw him have only 14 yards with a performance that was really only salvaged by a touchdown. So the Green Bay Packers are obviously a group to manage. Now, a team who had a lot of interest going in this week, a team that I was interested to see their performance, and a team with a lot of fantasy intrigue, is the New Orleans Saints, who this week in the matchup with the San Francisco 49ers offer a lot of thoughts to have. Now, obviously, we saw last week, Mark Ingram get benched about a quarter of the way through the game, with Tim Hightower coming in and performing fairly admirably, and Tim Hightower obviously being the player who helped many teams win in their league last year, being a late season pickup after he stepped in for the injured Mark Ingram. So this week it was interesting to see. I thought it would be interesting at least to see how Tim Hightower would perform and how much volume he would have. And he did have a fair amount of volume, actually out carrying Mark Ingram, having a couple more carries than him, and having himself about 87 yards and a touchdown. While Mark Ingram, on the other hand, made a lot more out of those carries, going over 120, having a touchdown, having almost 95 yards receiving, and Mark Ingram having one of the best fantasy days of his career, even with, once again, less touches than Tim Hightower. Now, obviously, this was against the San Francisco 49ers defense, which has had the league worst rush defense all throughout the year. They've been absolutely atrocious and an absolute feasting ground for running backs. But it's something to monitor, and obviously if you have an extra spot on your bench, Tim Hightower might be an interesting player to add, seeing as how he's unowned in the majority of NFL fantasy leagues. Also, another note from that game was another coming out performance for Michael Thomas, who at this point is owned in 75% of fantasy leagues. But Michael Thomas having 2 touchdowns and 63 yards against, once again, the growingly pathetic San Francisco 49ers defense. Now, moving on. Sleepers for this week, besides the players I've already mentioned, obviously. One player to actually look at may be Rashad Matthews on the Tennessee Titans, who had around 60, 70 receiving yards this week, but also posted 2 touchdowns thrown to him by Marcus Mariota. Rashad Matthews has slowly been becoming a consistent player this year, posting about 8 points or more in a majority of games this season. Well, and he's owned only in about 11% of leagues. So while he might not be a player to add for this week with them going against the Green Bay Packers, who have a fairly strong secondary, after that, over the next 2 weeks before the bye, he takes on the Colts, who obviously have a weak secondary. And while he may have had a subpar performance against them last time they played a few weeks ago, they're still a feasting ground for wide receivers. And then taking on the ever-inept Chicago Bears secondary. So Rashad Matthews might be a player to look at if you're looking for somebody to give you a little bit of a mid-season jolt to your receiving core. Now, other than that, notes from this Sunday night game. We saw the Raiders offense able to overcome the Broncos defense, which has slowly been becoming something that really hasn't been affecting the fantasy value of many players. While Amari Cooper wasn't able to post big numbers and Michael Crabtree wasn't, Latavius Murray was easily able to run on that defense to the tune of 100-something yards and 3 touchdowns, what I believe was the best fantasy performance of his career. Now, another big note to take moving into Week 10 is that we're finally out of the bye week hell period. We will not have another week with 6 teams on byes, so teams will be able to kind of come out of this week going more and more into their full strength of their team's capabilities. Anyway, though, going into next week, I wish you all the best of luck. That's all the time we have for the Galleon and the Gridiron. I'm Jake Elmsley, and there's more Sports Zone coming at you next. Hello, and welcome back to more Sports Zone. This is our baseball segment, which may be the final one for a while. Getting to third, my name's Jake Elmsley. I am not the regular host here, but I'm here today. I am joined by Aviva. I am joined by Kristen, and we only have one thing on the schedule today, and that is Game 7 of this historic World Series. We're probably the last people on the planet to talk to you about it, but we're going to do it anyway. So we're going to start with this game. Obviously, a phenomenal Game 7, one of the best baseball games I've ever watched. 8-7 Cubs over the Indians, with the Cubs coming back from a 3-1 deficit to win this World Series and finally end the city's World Series drought. Now, I suppose we'll go to you first, Kristen. What do you think was a winning factor in this game for the Cubs?
I think the Cubs, they were able to overcome all of the errors that they committed in this game. Their batting, their lineup really came through when they needed it to, and their pitching was strong towards the end. And I think the Indians just ran out of gas towards the end of this game. They weren't able to come back after the rain delay. And I think there were so many factors that just went in the Cubs' favor that allowed them to pull this one out.
Now, so you've said something interesting in there. I suppose I'll ask Aviva about this. Aviva, what do you think that do you think that the rain delay that I believe was in the end of the 9th inning or the middle of it, do you believe that really affected the Indians, who before that point had surged ahead? I believe they had 2 or 3 runs in the 8th inning to tie up the game and sending in the extra innings. Do you believe that this rain delay hurt them, killed some of that momentum?
Yeah, it definitely did, because the Indians scored like 2 or 3 runs, like you said, in the 8th inning. They tied the game, and they had all this momentum. And then the rain delay happens for I think 20 minutes, and everything just stopped. And it's really hard to get that momentum back after you stop playing for 20 minutes. So it definitely hurt the Indians.
I have to agree with that. While these are professional athletes, obviously when you're hitting kind of an emotional role like that, obviously this is a very emotional game for both teams, it is hard to kind of just sit down for 20 minutes and just say, just keep the same intensity level, everybody, and then get right back up and be fine. But I guess next I will ask you, Kristen, something that's very interesting. I always love to watch these Game 7s is how the managers use their pitching rotation. I suppose on both sides of the ball, what do you think of the way that these managers use basically all their starting pitchers over the course of the game?
I think on the side with the Cubs, the manager used Aroldis Chapman a little bit too far. He ran out of gas and gave up the big home run towards the end of that game, and I think that really put the dagger in that situation, and I was surprised that they were able to further come back from that afterwards.
Obviously, Aroldis Chapman, never really a player you want to have pitching 2 innings, especially when, like I said, you have the use of all of your starting pitchers on the Chicago Cubs team that obviously this whole year has had a very deep pitching rotation. But I suppose on your end, Aviva, would you agree with that? What do you think of the way that the managers utilize their pitching rotations?
I think for the Cubs, John Lester came in, I think, in the 5th or 6th inning, which was great because Joe Madden, the manager of the Cubs, used use that starting pitcher to his advantage. But then he used Chapman in the end of the 7th into the 8th, where then the Indians came back. So I think he did a great thing with Lester, but then also did a really bad thing with Chapman. Yeah.
Obviously now, I mean, one more thing, probably the thing that I believe you touched upon earlier, Chris, and the thing that I noticed very early in that game was just the amount of fielding errors for this Cubs team. I mean, they only ended the game with an official 3 errors, but just throughout that, I believe that they had a few plays where they had 2 or 3 errors within one hit. And I suppose that was one thing that really made me think that this Cubs team wasn't going to be able to come back. But looking at that, I suppose we'll look into the future very quickly. But I guess I'll ask each of you one question. Kristen, what do you see in the future for this Indians team?
I think the Indians going forward, they're going to have momentum from this World Series, and they're going forward into the next year coming off of this loss. So I think they're going to have a lot of momentum to get back to where they were. They have a lot to prove coming back. I think anything short of the World Series is going to be a disappointment for them. So we'll have to see going into next season if they're able to keep everybody together and go for the World Series again.
And I suppose I'll ask you this, Aviva. This Cubs team, do you think that their lineup, that they'll be able to keep together that lineup, that they'll be able to keep this momentum going, that they'll be able to, what do you see in the future for this team in the next season?
I think ideally the Cubs would want to keep everyone there. They won the World Series. But I also read an article that said like the Cubs are like are supposed to win the 2017 World Series, but you know it just ended. So I mean they're the best in baseball right now. I think ideally they want to keep their lineup. Their lineup is really good. Their pitching is also really good. So hopefully they'll still do well in the future, but we'll see.
Obviously, there are a couple of concerns with some of the age of some of those players on the Indians roster, but that's to give us something to talk about in the offseason from all of us at Getting the Third. That's all that we have time for. More Sports Zone coming at you next.
Hello and welcome back to SportsZone. This is our NBA segment, throwing it up. A little restrictive with the Jackets, as always. I'm Bobby Knight, and making his Throwing It Up debut is Chris Mullen joining me today. We're going to start. NBA rolled into its 2nd and 3rd week of action. Still a little bit early in the season, but some storylines are definitely taking shape. The big one that everyone's going to be following is that of the Warriors with Kevin Durant and how he will mesh with the big 3 that was previously there. They faced a homecoming of sorts for Kevin Durant when not a homecoming, but against his old team, the Thunder visited Oakland, and that game really was a no contest. But the Warriors really this season have kind of been an anomaly. So I'm going to kick it over to you, Chris. What do you make of the Warriors? They will beat the Thunder, then lose to the Lakers. What do we make of them in the early season?
Well, first, we are making the most negative assessments you could possibly make of a team that's 4-2 right now. So we got to remember that. Like, everybody's acting like the sky is falling, but that's only because we all have such high expectations for this Warriors team in the win column, with them obviously being the winningest regular season team of all time last year, going on a 20-something-0 run at the beginning of last year. So obviously the sky is not falling, but, you know, we got to analyze something. But, I mean, besides that, what I've been saying, we're still seeing the big problem I said would probably persist with them for a lot of the first chunk of the season this year, and that's been the chemistry still just isn't able to develop. These players still having trouble fully operating together. We saw the best version of what this could be when they played the Thunder, obviously, with Kevin Durant being the guy. Obviously, we've said also this team has in its starting lineup 4 players who can drop 30 without batting an eye on any given night without any one of them being able to take over. But they still have to get to that point where they're all able to completely cooperate and coexist with one another and kind of, you know, take a secondary role. Another one is exploding and kind of that guy being able to come back when another guy is starting to hit a streak. And just, they're still learning how to play together, but obviously there's still just so much talent on this team. The Lakers so far have been a surprising team this year with Luke Walton, impact already being felt along with all those young players, with D'Angelo Russell coming in, Brandon Ingram kind of living up to the hype so far. So, obviously, you know, we might be seeing last year the Lakers might be better than we all thought, which I don't believe, but, you know, we have to talk about something. But obviously, you know, it's too early to say the sky is falling with the Warriors.
Definitely. They're one of their bigger guys last year who you mentioned, any if they're 4 in the starting lineup can go up for 30. One of those is Klay Thompson, who's struggling in the early season. Do you think he's the primest candidate to have his offensive production declined? Is he the most expendable of those 4 players for this team to see success?
I wouldn't say that because, like I said, I mean, it really just I feel like for them the best take for them to get is just kind of feed who's ever hot at that time. So if they're having a night where Klay Thompson just can't seem to miss, I mean, obviously they're just going to feed the ball to Klay Thompson, who's one of the top 5 3-point shooters in the league. I mean, obviously it's kind of hard. He's not the flashiest player on that team, but he is still one of the better two-way players in the league. I mean, obviously, you're right. Probably if any of those guys' offensive numbers would go down, it would probably be Klay. But then, like I said, if he's on a streak, suddenly, maybe Kevin will be passing to him. It just the best way for them is to see how things kind of ebb and flow as the games go on.
Yeah, and you said it multiple times, and I think we have to reiterate it. We are really overanalyzing this team. They are 4-2. They are fine, and it's way too early for, even if they were struggling, for us to really be panicking. When you have all these big name star players go together, there's a learning and there's a growing curve. We saw that with the big 3 in Miami. I think we're seeing a similar thing to maybe a lesser degree here in Golden State. But other teams in the West are impressing early on. We mentioned the Thunder. Their only loss so far is to those Golden State Warriors. The San Antonio Spurs are seemingly against all odds, again, performing well in the early season. The Clippers, you mentioned the Lakers. Do you think the crop of talent that will compete with the Warriors in the West is shaping up to be stronger than many anticipated going into the season?
No, I wouldn't say that. I mean, coming on to the offseason, there isn't really any team in the Western, any of those top teams in the Western Conference that from a personnel perspective improved greatly. I mean, obviously, like we talked about the Lakers, Luke Walton will obviously be a big boost for them, but obviously they're not a team that's ready to compete consistently at a high level just with too many young players. But, I mean, no, you didn't really see the Clippers add anybody new. You didn't see the Spurs obviously lost Tim Duncan, who, his role was obviously diminished, but he's still a great player. So we haven't seen any, I mean, the Thunder obviously lost something in that personnel department, and I doubt that Russ, as hungry as he is, I'm sure that at some point Russell Westbrook will stop being able to drop 40 every night and carry that team on his back entirely. But no, I mean, once again, like I said at the beginning of the year, the West is for the Warriors, and the only thing that's going to stand in their way is them not being able to play together.
That's an interesting take there. One team who will not be getting in the Warriors' way at all this season is the winless New Orleans Pelicans as we transition to teams who have not started the season so well. New Orleans and Philadelphia are the 2 remaining winless teams in the league. New Orleans kind of against the odds, where they've got their big star player there, Anthony Davis, who should be coming into his own, entering his prime, but they're severely struggling. So, Jake, we're going to ask you a controversial hot take type question. Which of those teams do you think is going to get on track, going to win and sort of turn the ship around sooner?
I mean, they're both teams who have both, as recently, have had very close games. I believe last night the 76ers brought the Cavaliers to a 1-point win. The Cavaliers barely prevailing over the bottom team in that conference. And then we also saw the Pelicans bring, I believe it was the Clippers, to overtime just a night ago. So, I mean, obviously, when you have a player like Anthony Davis, who, like I said before, has been an absolute monster for this entire season. It's not Anthony Davis that's the problem. When he's scoring 20, 25, 30, even 50 points a couple of nights, it's not him who's the problem. We're just seeing a team that has absolutely nothing outside of him, really. I mean, I believe they're starting 2 undrafted players. They just cut Lance Stevenson to bring in Archie Goodwin, who obviously is the answer that New Orleans is looking for. And then you see the 76ers. They're a team that, as we've talked about a million times before, they have a lot of big men, a lot of valuable big men. But we're seeing Joel Embiid performing very well, dropping 22 on the Cavaliers the other night. We're seeing Okafor performing well in a 6th, 7th man role. But, I mean, obviously the 76ers is also a team with holes everywhere but that center swing power forward position. So, it's a tough thing to go up, but I say that the Pelicans do have the best star player, obviously, of those 2 teams. And usually in the NBA, that's what will win you. So I would say it would have to be the Pelicans with Anthony Davis finally getting something from one of his monster performances.
You would hope so, and I think the Pelicans organization would hope so, considering the large sums of money that they are giving him. Hopefully that'll translate to wins from their perspective. Before we sign off, I think, so we cannot be accused of being completely Western Conference centric, we will shift to the Eastern Conference just for a bit. The Cavaliers, obviously, are the team to beat. They're coming off their first title. LeBron James and company are playing well. But, Chris, I'll just ask you before we sign off, Is there any other team in the Eastern Conference who at this early stage seems like they can possibly bridge the gap at least a little bit between the Cavaliers and the rest of the Eastern Conference?
I mean, I can't cross my arms. We're seeing some teams that obviously made moves in free agency to win now are having a decent amount of success. I mean, you're seeing the Knicks obviously winning more games than they won through the first 6 last year. We're seeing the Bulls, who spent in free agency, having a little bit of success. But like I said this at the beginning, at the end of free agency, really none of these teams have bridged the gap in any meaningful way. We saw the Eastern Conference just like this last year with the Cavs right at the top. The Raptors, who, mind you, the Raptors are a team who are kind of implicated in some trade rumors this year for players such as Nerlens Noel. So they could be a team who, if they're able to really reinforce themselves and get in a win-now mentality, could have a chance. But I don't think that would be the best move for that organization at this time. That clearly has a lot of youth. Really, we're seeing a lot of these teams have bridged the gap to kind of become those mid-range 3rd, 4th seed teams in the East. But really, that's where the battle is in the East right now for those mid-range playoff spots. And clearly all these teams know the Cavs are still the dominant force in the East.
Yep. You heard it there. Hard-hitting analysis from Chris Mullen on Bobby Knight. We threw it up this week. We'll see where it lands next time. Stick around for more SportsZone after this. Hello and welcome back to SportsZone. This is AU Insiders. For the first time this semester, not captained by Dan Wagnato. I am Vincent and I'm going to give it my best shot. It was a big weekend this past weekend for the AU athletics. Lots of big news and lots of news going forward. We'll start in the world of field hockey, where the AU team went up to Boston last weekend, played Holy Cross in the semifinals. Natalie Conrath scoring a goal. They won 1-0 to advance to the championship game against Boston University, who had defeated them 1 week prior to clinch home field for the Patriot League tournament. In a really tight game that was decided early on, Rafaela Rugas scored off a penalty corner, off an assist from Samantha McCormick, and the Eagles' defense made that lead hold up. Mara Jacobs in the goal made 6 huge saves for the Eagles as they were able to capture the Patriot League title for the first time since 2013 and advance to the NCAA tournament. This was the 10th Patriot League title for Steve Jennings, leading the field hockey team, and it was their first time in the NCAA tournament since 2013. It was announced that they will play Kent State on Wednesday at AU, so a very big game, NCAA tournament game on the campus of American. So that's something to look forward to. And just to tidy up some other things from field hockey, last week the all-conference teams were announced. Natalie Conrath, Rafaela Rubas, and Angela Vertu making the All-Patriot League first team, while Leia Domenico, excuse me for the butchering of that name, as well as Rachel Stefano making the second team. And Rubas was also named the Patriot League tournament MVP for her goal in the championship game and was joined on the all-tournament team by Natalie Conrath, Mara Jacobs, and Rachel Stefano. So they are looking forward to their game against Kent State on Wednesday. That's very exciting to have a tournament game hosted on campus. And continuing in the news of lots of big events happening on campus at AU this week, the men's soccer team, by virtue of their 3-1 victory over Lehigh on Saturday, clinched the regular season Patriot League title and the right to host the semifinals and finals this Friday and Sunday. Dale Ludwig scoring 2 goals for the Eagles. Ludwig was joined by Panos Nakid as well as Michael Cherry on the All-Patriot League first team that was just announced yesterday, with Ludwig being named the midfielder of the year and Nakid being named the offensive player of the year. Senior defender Jake Garcia was named to the second team, while goalkeeper Lucas Bellinger was named to the third Patriot League all-third team. So they have their semifinal match this Friday morning that they're looking forward to. The other team in action was women's volleyball. They were swept by Lehigh, so it was their first Patriot League loss of the season, dropped them to 14-1. However, by virtue of last week's results, the AU women's volleyball team had clinched the regular season championship and the right to host the Patriot League tournament, which will be played next weekend, not the same weekend as the men's Patriot League soccer tournament will be played. But so that's big news for AU. They have an NCAA tournament game, then the Patriot League men's soccer team this weekend, and the following weekend they've got the women's volleyball tournament on campus. So lots of exciting news going on. Unfortunately, women's soccer's season was completed. They did not qualify for the postseason Patriot League tournament, but the 3 fall teams are still going and still going strong. So it'll be exciting to see how they perform this week as we move into the postseason. Winter sports, to tidy some things up there, wrestling opened at the Virginia Tech Hockey Open this past weekend, and they performed pretty well. It was just kind of a match to see, or an event to really gauge how the season was going to go. Men's and women's basketball opens their seasons on Friday. Men's basketball opening against nationally ranked Maryland at College Park, so that should be exciting. But we'll take a look at those games and break them down. Hopefully Dan will be back next week to give the AU Athletics a little bit more justice than I did. But that's all the time we have for AU Insiders. Stick around for more SportsZone after this.
Hello and welcome back to more Sports Zone. This is one of our favorite segments here, Thumbles, where we talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. My name's Jake Elmsley. This is Cody Cohen, American sweetheart, and we can give us some thumbs. All right, first off, a thumbs down to my one baseball prediction on the year not coming true, with the Cleveland Indians not being able to take a game that was repeatedly handed to them in Game 7 over the Cubs, and with the Cubs ending their drought. Thumbs mid to the Cubs World Series drought ending. I'm going to miss being able to think of all the things that have happened since then, since the Cubs last won their World Series. Problem is, now I can only list stuff that's between now and Tuesday? Tuesday. In between now and Tuesday. Anyhow, moving on from that, thumbs down to the Boston Celtics, who have so far been underperforming through their first 6 games, losing last night to the Denver Nuggets. Thumbs up to me just realizing that the Hornets are 4-1. Thumbs up to me for remembering the Hornets. Sometimes I forget that they're even in the league. Big thumbs up to the New England Patriots for crushing the bye week this week. I believe it was a score of 43-3. The bye week never stood a chance. Another giant thumbs up to the American University Men's Rugby Football Club for grinding out a close victory at home against Frostburg, winning at a score of 27-25 with a last-minute go-ahead try by Rafael Rivera, and with a very, very tough corner conversion kick made by William Wesley Taylor to help the team improve to a record of 6-1 and guaranteeing them, I believe, after all the calculations are made, the 2nd seed in the playoffs this season. Now, another thumbs up to the All-American Challenge this Friday. The American Veterans Association was able to raise, I believe, over $400 for homeless veterans, and it was a very interesting time and something that I hope, as they have said, will continue throughout the entire semester. Thumbs up to the impending Veterans Day. Going off of that, I salute all American servicemen. Thank you for your service. And thumbs up to this fun-sized thumbs segment. And that's all I have. So grace us, Cody Cohen.
Wow. Yeah, that was pretty great, Jake. Good job. Okay. You all know me. American University's Cody Cohen, as always. Okay. Thumbs up for sunny weather. It's going to be a great week. It's going to be cold, however. There's going to be thumbs in the middle, but no, it's still sweater weather, though, which I like. It's a good thing. Thumbs down because half our cast is not here today. Very upsetting. Thumbs up for Ryan. He's doing better. Ryan, hope you feel better, buddy. Can't wait for you to come back soon. Thumbs down for Dan because he's not here. Very, very upsetting, Dan. I don't know why you're not here. Man, frustration. Okay, also, life hack time. So, everybody likes bagels. I love bagels. I'm from New York, bagel guy. They say to keep a bagel fresh, if you put it in a freezer bag, you leave it out, it'll still keep it nice and good. It won't go stale if you put it in a nice freezer bag. How awesome is that? Well, that's my daily life hack and my thumbs. Aviva, take it away.
Okay. Thumbs up to me for predicting that the Cubs are going to win in 7. I was the only one who predicted that, so thumbs up to me. Thumbs up to the Cubs for winning and ending their drought. Thumbs down to me as well because I sadly had an exam the next day on Thursday and had to go to sleep early, so I could not see the end of the game. Thumbs up to Jake for watching the game with me and Kristen. It was so much fun. And thumbs up to... No, I think that's it. Okay, Kristen, here you go.
All right, I'm going to give a thumbs up to everyone who's here today. We're short-staffed, but still going strong. Thumbs down to me for forgetting to give a big thumbs up last week to Curtis Granderson for receiving the Roberto Clemente Award. It's one of MLB's greatest honors, and he's a very, very deserving recipient. The Mets are very lucky to have him on the team. Thumbs up to the Cubs for taking home the World Series. Thumbs up to the Indians as well. They both sides made it a great series to watch. Thumbs down to the baseball off season. I don't know what I'm supposed to do all winter. Hopefully the Knicks can pick it up and start winning a little bit for me. And thumbs up, I guess, to the Giants for barely hanging on for the victory over the Eagles yesterday. That would have been really bad if they blew that lead, so thumbs up to them for hanging on and winning that one. And that's all I have, so here's Vince.
All right. Rounding out the show this week, we will start off with the thumbs down to the Pittsburgh Steelers losing to divisional rivals, the Baltimore Ravens. Ex-Steeler Mike Wallace scoring a 95-yard touchdown really put a dagger in my heart. But even more so, Ben Roethlisberger's terrible performance really was just not uplifting at all. Thumbs down, Sammy Coates can't catch a ball to save his life. Thumbs down to Chris Boswell's onside kick Rabana attempt where he kicked it about 2 feet instead of the requisite 10 yards for it to count. That was about summed up the game in a nutshell. We'll go thumbs, middle. Arsenal tied against Tottenham, the biggest rivals this week. Really couldn't capitalize on about an hour of dominant play, and they gave away a penalty. Apparently, the thumbs down to Mark Clattenburg, the official, because apparently when you win the ball cleanly in the box, now that the penalty, Moussa Dembele wasn't even touched, won a penalty. I've got opinions about that. We'll go thumbs up to all the AU teams doing really well. That's awesome to have them succeeding on campus. And I guess we'll round it out with an unpopular opinion. Thumbs down to the Chicago Cubs winning the World Series. Thumbs up to the fans who really were invested, but thumbs down to the bandwagon fans who are claiming it, that they've been fans the whole time. And also thumbs down to the storyline that the city of Chicago is deprived of championships because the Blackhawks have been a dynasty for the 2010s. They won 3 NHL titles. The city of Chicago was graced by Michael Jordan in the 90s, possibly one of the greatest NBA teams ever. They had the Super Bowl Shuffle team in '85, winning, and probably one of the better NFL regular seasons and seasons just in general. So unless you were an infant, in which case the World Series means nothing to you, and born in the past 2 years, you've seen a team in Chicago win. So to say you're deprived and that you really needed this championship really makes me angry. The city of Cleveland, they can go and hang their hat on the Ohio State Buckeyes, because that's how bad it is in Cleveland, that they're claiming a team that's not even remotely close to them in Columbus, Ohio, as their own. So when you think you got it bad, Chicago, you could be Cleveland. So thumbs down to you, and thumbs down to that rant. I don't know. I had to get it off my chest. So I think that's everything. We don't have a poll question this week because Dan's sort of the poll question guru, but he's not here this week. And I guess thumbs down to everyone who couldn't make it this week. Hopefully we'll have a bigger staff next week. So for Jake, for Aviva, for Kristen, for Cody, I am Vince, and this has been SportsZone for this week. Stick around for SportsZone next week.